I'm Ryan, this is my brother Daniel, and this is Rolls in the Family. And you know what we like to do as a family often?
Hang out?
Hang out playing board games.
Hey!
So much so, in fact, that I guess family is in the name of our channel.
Feels like we should be the experts on this topic.
There's a little bit of pressure here to get this right. But that is what we were talking about today, are what are, in our opinion, the best family board games, which we will admit is a very ambiguous
You can only play these games
topic.
with your family.
It could be interpreted in a lot of ways.
Right.
So let's clarify kind of like the criteria we were going off of. I think we're thinking games that are pretty easy to teach, accessible, broad appeal. Like you can play them. Adults will really enjoy them. Kind of older kids would also very much enjoy them. You typically are probably at a minimum of 4 players. You're kind of looking at a little bit larger player counts. Another one I kind of thought of is you're probably more likely to play the same game with the same group.
Yeah.
So like having the same people come back and play the game.
Right.
So those are some of the things we were kind of considering here as we assembled our list. We'll see if we landed anywhere near each other in our picks. But if you think any of these games sound like you might enjoy them with your family, or there's a lot of other contexts where these might work. I mean, it could work with 2 couples that want to play board games, but really any group that you want like nice, accessible, easy learning games. We'll have the links all down in the description below for you to check out. Any purchases do help support the channel, and we appreciate that. And we hope ultimately it's the purpose of the video. We love hearing when we help someone find a game that then they had a really, really good experience with.
Yes.
But we got a lot of games to talk about here. So we are going to jump right into it with Daniel's number 10.
Yeah, my number 10, and obviously the caveat that like we haven't played, every board game in the world.
Wait, Daniel, you haven't?
Oh, was I supposed to do that before we
that was a prerequisite. Yeah.
Shoot. So this is our experience of games that we've played that we think will fit this well. But I think we've got, at least on my list, I know Ryan's won't be this, 10 awesome recommendations here. So we're going to start out my number 10 with a game that can play at 2-player. It's actually the way I've played it most, but plays, I think, really well at that 4-player count, and that is going to go to Splendor. So Splendor is a kind of a shorter game or whatnot, where you're on your turn, you're able to either take these gems from kind of a supply. You can either take 3 gems if they're all different colors, or 2 of the same, and you're trying to collect gems to ultimately purchase these cards that are kind of out in a grid in front of everyone. And the interesting thing is every card that you purchase, then whatever resource is on that card is then a production that you have for buying future cards. So if I buy a card with a green on it, now every future card I buy that needs a green costs 1 less. You're kind of building up a little bit this engine, but Splendor is very much a race. You are racing to 15 victory points. And so it's a game that, in my experience, I've played it a lot with my wife. I've played it with, many other people as well. It's really easy to learn in terms of just the rule sets, very simple, but I find people really gravitate to the just interesting strategy of kind of analyzing the state of the board and figuring out what is the most efficient way for me to get to 15 points and whatnot. And so it's a game that I think works really well as kind of a one of those first games to get and for families and whatnot. And it's one that's worked great for me. So it's going to be coming in at my number 10, Splendor.
Nice, and that game's got some nice poker chips for the gems. That
it does.
I feel like that's a selling point of the game. Is it's a very tactically satisfying game to play.
The box is oversized. That's one of my one complaints.
It'll look good on your shelf.
Yes, it does look good.
Cool. My number 10 is also a game that caps at 4 players. I'm kind of thinking about the 4-player experience here, but I think it is so strong in both the broad appeal of the theme and the ease to teach and to play with a wide variety that I still wanted to include it. And this is Cascadia. So Cascadia is a game about building up kind of these habitats with animals in it. And so you're getting these hexagonal tiles that you're able to put next to each other to try to make big groups of the same terrain types. You're trying to kind of score points that way. But then on top of that, each tile says which animals can go on that tile, and the animals have their own scoring. So you're not only thinking about where you want to put the terrain, but also where do I want to put things so that I can get the animals to score well. And each turn you always have to pick a pair. You're always picking a tile and an animal. So it's kind of like, which two things currently help me the most? And it's just a really interesting decision space from that very simple concept. And it is so simple. Like, there's almost nothing you can do illegally in this game. It's like you
don't
take
test me, Ryan.
Yeah. You take the tile. The tile can go anywhere as long as it's touching. You just ideally want it to be next to the same type. And then the animals, you just have to match it. So you can potentially play this with very young kids.
Yeah,
they might not be as competitive, but this is one that, you know, adults are really going to enjoy, especially if you enjoy that kind of puzzly. It's kind of two puzzles layered on top of each other, and then it's all just got a very attractive theme with the nature. It's not going to off-put people that maybe are a little bit intimidated by board games. Yeah, like it's a good welcoming game to people that maybe haven't played a lot of board games. So definitely want to check out if you're looking for something a little puzzly for up to 4 players, and that is Cascadia.
Very nice, Ryan. Very nice. My number 9 is probably one of the, I guess you would probably one of the heaviest, I guess, games on this list. This is really kind of in that, you know, if you're that family that's you know, wanting something that kind of starts to take that step into a little bit, just more things happening in a mechanically in the board game itself. And this is going to go to Wingspan. I think Wingspan is a great family option for several reasons. One, the presentation is just fantastic. And like thematically, people are just so drawn to it. Not only the, you know, you got like the little bird feeder thing that you roll the dice through, and you the board just looks beautiful. Every card is a bird that is unique and has its own unique fact on it. So all of that just is very interesting, and I just find every time we play, and the cute little eggs. How could I forget those?
Yes, I was about to mention it.
I looked at Ryan's face. Yeah. It's like, he's going to say it. It just draws people into it. It's a really enticing thing. And then I think in terms of just the strategy of it, what it does so well is it's a little bit more of a thinky, you know, planning strategy game. But again, the mechanics are simple in that on your turn, you really have kind of your 4 actions on your board. And so, you know, in the game, really kind of what you're doing is you're you have these cards, you know, these bird cards that you're trying to play out into your environment. You've kind of got 3 rows that you can play them into, and you're playing them kind of from left to right. But the interesting thing is, when they get played into a row, that also is building up an engine for that row whenever you take that row's action. And so you're not only kind of getting what the card does immediately, but you're building up a little bit of engine. And so this game has a little bit more to it in terms of there's some end game scoring stuff. You know, there's obviously just, you know, lots of cards and being able to kind of, you know, discern what are the ones I want to play and whatnot. So kind of reading through text and figuring out kind of, you know, what's the best option. But I think for games that kind of take that next step and really start to, you know, I would say this is a little bit of a gateway into the more happening in the board game space. And obviously you can infinitely go beyond that with other games. I think this one
maybe not infinitely, but
infinitely, right. I think this one's a great option just because it does still keep the actual decision space so simple.
Yeah.
And that's made it, between that and the presentation being just beautiful, it's one that really, I think as a family will draw people in and be a one that's really enjoyable. So that is why it is coming in at my number 9.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. It really boils down to, are you okay with a little bit of complexity and like the needing to read cards and like figure out which cards you want? But then if you're okay with that, the overall flow is very kind of intuitive and smooth.
For sure.
Very nice. My number 9 is kind of feels more in the like what we would call party games, kind of more social games, kind of away from strategy. But it's one that we find actually works a little better at some of the lower player counts, which a lot of party games don't. Like I think this works really well, kind of anywhere from 4 to 6 players. And it's actually a sequel to a very popular party game that we also enjoyed. This is Stella Dixit Universe. So it leans into what was originally introduced in Dixit, which is these big kind of dreamy illustrated cards that have all these weird different pictures that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And that in and of itself is really the huge draw of the game. Is it's very fun to just look at all of these things and see them come out. But each round there's going to be a word that's randomly selected, and there are 15 of these cards that are face up on the table, and everybody on their own little board is going to mark all of the cards that they think could connect to that word in some way. And you're really trying to think like, what is somebody else going to think? And you're trying to get as many as possible, because each one that you connect with somebody else, you're going to score points for that. Or even Super Spark, one of our favorite things in this game, where only you and one other person did it, and you get a bonus
You must
point
high five when you
for it, and you
Super
must
Shark.
high five. That is a requirement. But you also don't want to do too many, because if you're the one that bids on the most, you have to get them all. Otherwise, you get like a penalty of half points. So it's this very fun game of trying to get another kind of interpret these images. What are other people going to think? And you end up going around the table and like naming them to see if anybody else got them. And the reason it really got pushed onto my list over something like Dixit or some other games like this is the how it works so well at the lower player counts. I mean, it actually caps at 6. You can't play it with more than 6. So is that piece of it. There's also the piece that you don't have to come up with your own creative clues. Like the word is just determined by the card, which I think makes it a little more accessible, a little less of a, like we found with some games like Dixit, where you need to kind of really be creative. Sometimes that's off-putting to certain people that just don't want that in a board game. So I could see Stella working really, really well for a family or family and friends, kind of a smaller group that want kind of that more party style, fun kind of like creative interpretations, but it's got kind of like a nice game structure layered onto it that's pretty interesting. So definitely recommend Stella.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree with you on that one. So much so that it's my number 8.
Don't you love when that happens? We don't have to think of a different segue.
Great planning. Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of, you've mentioned most of kind of my thoughts around that. I think it's one that also just thinking in a family environment, when you're looking at a word and then, looking at all these images and trying to, I love the feeling of trying to make an argument for why it could be. It's like making that stretch of like, oh, but, and you're doing it in the context of thinking about the other people at the table. Like, would they make that connection of this? And so in terms of a family or just a group of people who maybe know each other well, sometimes that can create some really fun moments of like, even, oh, I bet they would see that, or sometimes you even have those kind of personal things. And again, the Super Spark just factor is one of my favorite mechanics, just in kind of more partyish games, because it's so exciting. It's this
just this nice energy around the table, and you feel like in the club. Like everybody else is out. Everybody else is out,
but us two, we got it, and we both get rewarded for it. So, I totally agree that Stella of the Dixit kind of the universe of games, to me, was the on my list the top option that I would recommend for families. So that is my number 8.
Look at Daniel and I in agreement on that.
Let's see if we can keep it going.
And it is a great game also they have tons of expansions because it's compatible with the old Dixit stuff. So if your family loves Disney, there's a Disney Dixit, which not only would get you the game Dixit as well, but you could use all those cards in Stella.
I haven't gotten that one yet.
There's a lot of potential there. Cool. My number 8 is what has kind of grown into my kind of top recommendation for a cooperative game for kind of a small group family. You want something accessible but appealing, that has some nice little strategy and variety, but is also very approachable in its mechanics. This is Marvel United. And this is definitely a home run if you have any people in your family that are into Marvel. If you've watched the movies, or like, that's definitely gonna be a benefit here. But most people like are aware of these characters, and you're each gonna take a superhero. You're gonna every game pick a supervillain. You're gonna randomize kind of these 6 locations, and you're working as a team to basically complete 2 of the 3 objectives so that you can then defeat the villain. And so you have to be defeating thugs, saving civilians, or addressing these threats that the villain has around the different places. But it has a really clever cooperative mechanism in that whenever you play a card on your turn, you get the icons on your card, but you also get the icons on the player that played before you. And these icons are what let you move or attack or save, do the different things of the game. And so every card you play isn't just about what you want to do. It's about, am I setting up the next player to help them do what they want to do? And so it's so baked into the mechanics to be cooperating and to be like, okay, like I could kind of go with either of these. Which of these is better for you? And so I find that works really well. And I mean, we're talking a game that plays in a half hour. And so with the variety that you can get with mixing and matching, and just the fun shared experience of trying to bring down this villain, it's one I've had a lot of fun with. I've had a lot of success in a variety of groups, ranging from kind of more gaming groups to people that really haven't played a lot of board games. And there's also, if you enjoy it, there's potential to expand it with some additional content, get more heroes. You don't need to go nearly as far down the expansion rabbit hole. In fact, I would advise you probably don't, unless you absolutely are playing it all the time. But you even just picking up a couple things, you could pick up the X-Men base set, like that really, because all the content is mix and match, it gives you so many options to kind of play with this superhero sandbox. And so I definitely, if you're looking for a cooperative game and you even remotely like the superhero theme, I think Marvel United is the top family weight choice.
Yeah, so that one missed my list mainly just because I personally haven't played it a ton. It's one that I do anticipate as kids get older that's going to be a really awesome cooperative
That's what
one.
I'm banking on.
That's what we're banking on. That's why we had kids. Anyways, very nice, Ryan. My number 7 now is a game that I think of games on this list, I can think of maybe 1 or 2 others that are like this, where just every part of the game is just a wonderful dopamine hit, and it just feels so good as you're playing it. And this is going to go to Space Base. So Space Base is a game where you're kind of customizing your own slot machine of you kind of have this whole board from numbers 2 all the way up to 12. And throughout the game, you're going to have the ability to actually kind of be customizing what things trigger on those numbers. Because on every person's turn, kind of rotate around. On one person's turn, they're going to roll these 2 dice. And then everyone at the table is going to take those 2 numbers and either combine them together and trigger the combined. So if you roll, 5 and a 6, you could either trigger your 5 and 6 slot, or combine it together and trigger your 11 slot. And that, first of all, is just super fun that everyone's playing at the same time. You're never waiting. Every person's turn is interesting. So you're just over and over and over, running the slot machine, doing that.
Probably rewiring things in your brain that, probably isn't going to help you in your life.
It's in a healthy way. And so you're doing that, but then on your turn, you're going to be accumulating gold and whatnot, and you can spend that to buy cards from kind of a market and when you buy a card, you place it into your slot, and then you take the current card and you flip it upside down and slot it kind of upside down underneath. Now that's interesting because whatever is slot. So whatever's the main card there, the kind of blues, the blues is what you get when you roll on your turn. But the reds that are underneath is whatever you get when it's somebody else's turn. So you're kind of trying to, figure out how much, do you want to not only make it better on your turn, but also make it better when other people are rolling as well. Because obviously that's happening more often. And there's just so much with the powers of the cards that you can do. I mean, first of all, just from a probability perspective, there's the question of do you upgrade kind of the more common rolls, the 5, 6, 7s, kind of in there, or do you go all in on like an 11 or a 12 where usually the abilities of those cards are crazy powerful because they're a lot harder to get. Now, what's really interesting is there's also cards that you can get that can manipulate like dice, so you can make it so that it's more likely to get those kind of outlier rolls. Just a ton of like fun opportunities to customize, and then you're constantly not only building your engine in this board, but then seeing the fruit of that engine every single turn. And that's just
at least
the whole
hopefully.
Game. At least, yeah.
There's always that chance you get unlucky, and
right.
it's like,
I guess, sorry, fruit maybe is the wrong word. You're seeing the outcome of your engine, for better or for worse, every single turn. So it's one that, from the moment the game starts to as soon as it ends, you are just experiencing that satisfying engine.
There's not a lot of waiting in this game.
And so it's one that I think in a family group, everyone, is going to be just having a good time, outside of the caveat of maybe you're doing really bad, which I guess any game has that caveat. But it's one that we've obviously enjoyed a ton, and I think can highly recommend for a good one to look at for families looking at games for their group. So that is my number 7.
Nice. That one narrowly missed my list, but it is a great pick. It is a great pick. I think maybe it was held back a little bit by it. It is a little bit. I would put it like closer to Wingspan in some of the like more complex card effects. So there's like a little bit more going on.
Card effects, yeah.
But I agree with everything you said. Like I think it still is a very, very strong pick in this setting.
Okay.
My number 7. Is one that I've seen the evidence of how well it can work as a family game, specifically on my wife's side of the family. They really enjoyed this game, and it became one that we played again and again. It kind of was the go-to game. It's one that if you just buy the game, it goes to 6 players. But if you buy a second copy of the game, it can now go to 12 players because you can just, which I did, and it's actually very nice to have this game now that goes to 12. This is Super Mega Lucky Box. And so this is a game, I sometimes describe it to people, it's like advanced bingo, because everybody is there's all these square dry erase cards that all of them have a 3x3 grid of numbers on them. And you're going to start with 3 of those at the beginning of the game that you've picked from like a choice of 5. And then each round, a card is going to be flipped, and it's going to be a 7. And everybody can cross out any 7 on their 3 cards. You pick which 7 you want to cross out. Then the next one is a 4. You get to cross off a 4. Whenever you finish a row or finish a column, it gives you a bonus. So the bonus might say you get a 2 that you immediately get to play, or you get any number you want, or you might get a moon, which moons at the end of the game, whoever has the most is going to score, whoever has the least is going to get a penalty. You might get a star that within a round, depending on how many stars you get bonus points, and you want to get more stars in the same round. And so there's all these bonuses, which can then cascade. You can have like, oh, I got a 2, and that causes me to finish this, which gives me a 7, which that's just a very satisfying moment when you rattle off this chain combo. But it's got some fun things with kind of understanding. Like it's very light and accessible. I mean, you're just crossing off numbers, but there's a little bit of room to kind of like understand the probabilities. Like the way the 9 cards in a round are determined is from a deck of 18 where there's 2 of each number. So there's not going to be more than 2 of a number. You know that like if a 3 is already be drawn, there could be another one, or not. And another major part of the game is you have these lightning tokens that you can use to bump the number. So a 3 came up, but I could use 2 lightning to turn it into a 5. And picking the right time to do that, and you really want to minimize the chances of ending in a place where, a 6 came up and I can't play it. Like you don't want to waste a turn that you can't play. And so it ends up just being a very fun crossing things off. You ultimately want to finish the boxes by crossing all 9, and you'll score points based on the round. Each new round, you get a new selection of 3 boxes and can pick one to complement what you have. And after 4 rounds, we tally up all the points. So one that I've just seen work really well, it works so well across player counts. Like you can play this anywhere from 2 to, if you get another copy, 12. I mean, heck, you can get another copy play with 18.
Keep going.
Yeah, why stop? But like that flexibility is really, really nice. And I found that like most people tend to enjoy this game, even if they're not really into games much. But there's enough there for people who do enjoy games to still have a good time with it. So that is Super Mega Lucky Box.
Nice. That did not make my list because it's trash. So no, I'm just kidding.
You haven't played that one a lot.
I haven't played it that much, but yeah, good choice. My number
just a pity. Good choice.
Pity, great choice, Ryan / not. My number 6 is a newer game that we have both gotten within the last year. Definitely has a lot of hype in the board game world, and I think for us, absolutely delivered, and now has solidified a spot for me in games for families to check out. And this is going to go to Heat Pedal to the Metal. So Heat is a racing game. And I think that in and of itself, there's been other board games that have tried to kind of do a racing game. And it can be a little tricky to deliver a game that truly feels like the thrill of racing while you're having good mechanics and it not just being, all luck. And I think this game just really hits that sweet spot because you kind of first of all, you got the big track, and so everyone's got their cars out there, and you've got your personal player board, and it's really a game of kind of card management. That's how you're ultimately moving your car, because you have your gears 1 to 5, and whatever gear you're in, 4. There we go. That's how many cards you have to play on your turn. So obviously, the faster the higher gear you get in, the faster you're going. So you're going to want to do that. However, the real kicker is that on the track, there's these curves, and every curve has a speed limit that you have to kind of stay under to go through the curve. Otherwise, you'll start taking heat as a penalty. And so let's say a curve is, a 5. Whatever my cards are that I play, anything that goes over, I have to take a heat for every one that is over when going around that curve. So that really is the crux of like how you're trying to shift up and shift down so that you're successfully getting through the curves. And I love that it mechanically is great and thematically it's great. Like it makes total sense. And so that part's really interesting. I love how the game, obviously being a race, you can take heat into your deck because there are ways, whether through slowing down or other methods, that you can end up cooling heat out of your deck. And a big part of this game is knowing when to push it, to make a move and take heat, because it gets you that extra, position of getting ahead. And wind's going too far, and I find the winner of a game of heat will have pushed it just the right amount, and whereas the person who maybe falls in last was close but just burned out right before. And so it's the racing experience. Like if you enjoy that kind of racing theme and want
a racing
racing
family
game,
weight game, this is the one, I think.
For sure. And it's got, I think, a lot of replayability too, not only in just the base game. I think comes with 4 tracks, but there's all these there's a tournament module, there's customizing your car, there's a lot in even just the base game. That this is a fantastic family option for people who want that racing experience. And so definitely one worth checking out. That is my number 6.
And I think I think another big draw of it is it plays well anywhere from 2 to 6 players
That's a great
because
point.
of how you can add in the kind of AI cards
Computer
that are
bot.
really easy to manage
They
but
work
fill out the
great.
race.
They work great.
And so 2 to 6 players is a really nice
Yeah.
range there.
Absolutely.
Very nice. My number 6 is one that I guess is another example like my last one that I've had a lot of good times playing it with my wife's family. It's one that's just got a very appealing theme, very easy to teach. I mean, this is like one of those ones that when you're not quite sure with the composition of group, it's like this feels like a pretty safe bet. This is Sushi Go Party.
Mm.
And Sushi Go Party is a kind of card drafting at its simplest. If you've never played a card drafting game, it's where you're going to have a hand of cards. You get to pick the one you want to play this turn. Everybody else is doing that with their own hand. Everybody, reveals their cards, and then you pass the hand to the player to your left. And now you have a new hand that you're going to be picking one from. And you just keep doing that until they all get picked. And in this case, you're drafting all these cute different sushi types. You're getting
So
tempura, nigiri, and they've all got these cute little faces. And they all score in different ways. So like the tempura, you want to get pairs of them to get points.
Mhm.
But then you, with the maki rolls, you're comparing how many maki rolls you have to everybody else around the table to determine if you score points at the end. And so simple, different scoring conditions. But this one can play up to 8 players when you have when you have the party edition, and it lets you change up the menu so you can change what cards are in the game each time, which is really nice if you're going to be playing this, repeatedly, so that you can kind of have some variety. But I just love that it strikes that balance again that I was talking about of people that want to think a little bit and you can kind of think about like, okay, am I going to see this hand again, depending on how many players are there? What is the person to my left doing? Am I giving them, is it worth me kind of blocking them, even though it's not quite the best thing for me? But then you can have somebody across the table that is literally just picking the card that they like the
That's
picture.
right.
Like, because there's no card that's illegal to play. Like you just, all of them you could play. And so it really strikes that nice balance of letting people tune their own mental energy to where they want it to be for this particular game, all in a package that's very attractive. And yeah, I think it's a great one. Plays pretty quick. You play 3 rounds and then total up all your scores. Yeah, that is Sushi Go Party.
Man, card drafting. So good. So
good mechanic.
My number 5 is going to go to a cooperative party game that is just one we've gotten recently and has been absolutely incredible. And this is going to go to So Clover. This game is, again, kind of a new thing, I guess, in a lot of these board games now in the party sphere is a cooperative experience. And it's one that works so well in this because kind of the way the game works is that everyone gets a this clover leaf and then is dealt these kind of randomized little squares, randomized cards that are placed on the clover leaf, essentially putting 2 words next to each other on each of the 4 sides of the clover leaf. And then simultaneously, everyone is writing a single word on that each side of the clover leaf that is trying to connect the 2 words. And that right there is such a fun exercise. At least for, I think both of us really enjoy that. It's so interesting trying to think of what is the best word to try to get these 2 together. And then what happens is after everyone does that, you're going to go person by person. So, if you started with me, you would take the 4 cards and flip them, upside down and take an additional 5th one from the deck and shuffle those 5 together. And then reveal the 5 with my clover. And then everyone else as a team is trying to figure out what are the 4 and what's the right orientation of them. And something that I think has kind of surprised us and why I think this is a great family game is that's a really fun and funny exercise to do. Like, because everyone's kind of, discussing like, trying to get in the head of the person who did the clover of, oh, maybe they meant this, or maybe they, and people, you have to talk about this out loud to make your argument, but everyone is just laughing to themselves because you could say, well, what about this? Or what if they said this? And then as the clue giver, you're also, you can't help it all, obviously. So you're just watching this, but you're just like I'm always like biting my lip because I'm like trying to not, give any indication, but it's so funny to listen to what people think I might have been thinking about
Yeah.
it. And so people put forward their guests and there's all, scoring based off kind of how well you did and whatnot. And so, the scoring, it's kind of just do the best you can. But for us, just the party experience, it's a challenging exercise, in terms of making the words. And so it's got kind of that side of it. But man, it's fun and funny. And I think one thing we've noticed is this one has such a wide appeal. Like it's worked for the more gamery people and people who really don't like strategy in games and just want to, just sit down and have a good time. So that's why for me, it's coming in at number 5 and one of my top recommendations for family games. So Clover.
Nice. It's a great game.
It's so good.
We've had a lot of good specific family moments in the last year and a half playing that game.
Rules in the family.
All right, number 5 for me here.
Yes.
This is one that I didn't initially think was going to make my list, but
TI4?
once I was thinking about it more, I think Twilight Imperium is just the right. No, it is not Twilight Imperium. This is a game that we have played a ton over the years with the first edition. There was a new second edition that came out that we're big fans of the changes they did here. This is Dungeon Fighter, and this is a game that combines, it's a cooperative experience with kind of this dungeon crawling theme, but very humorous dungeon crawling. It's kind of making fun of the tropes and things.
Yeah.
But it's all based around the way that you fight these monsters is by bouncing dice on the table to try to land them on a target.
This ain't your typical board game.
Silly dexterity game. And I think what really made me start to realize that it's a good fit for this is one, the player count. It can go up to 6 players, the shared team experience, and the fact that just like that fun exercise that's very accessible. Like anybody, you might be bad at it, but anybody can sit there and try to throw dice at a target.
Right.
Is just a fun shared experience as everybody is like has buy-in to like everybody's shot. They're invested in it. And then as you go, the game is going to force you to do more and more difficult things because you might meet a monster that's like, oh, we need to actually bounce it over this firewall, or we need to slide it off this waterfall thing, or flick it off my hand. So there's all these kind of like little trick shots and things. And so it just is a very fun, we often describe it as kind of like a gamer's party game because it's got this whole side of like the dungeon crawling, and we get coins and we can spend them to get items, and there's almost this light role playing with you have your character that has the abilities, and so there's a little bit of like, I mean, I wouldn't like play this with anybody, or I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everybody because it's like you got to be okay with a little bit going on, but then it's wrapped around this very accessible, silly shared experience and things that are going to get people laughing. And then the shared excitement of if you beat a room or beat the game or narrowly lose. I could just see it going really well in kind of a family context or family and close friends. So yeah, we have played this one quite a bit.
We have.
Probably more than almost anybody in the world, honestly, because it's not that popular of a game. But definitely one that we think has kind of flown under the radar for a lot of people. It kind of just fills a spot that there's almost no other game for us that fills quite that balance of like goofy, silly fun, but like game meat to the game that has some interesting decisions. So if that sounds like it could be your cup of tea, definitely check out Dungeon Fighter.
Goofy and meaty. That's
goofy, meaty. Yep.
2 adjectives I would not put together. Okay, my number 4 is going to go to a game that, man, this might be a lot of people's, this could be their intro game to the hobby. It is an absolute classic, and I think for good reason. I think it is a wonderful family game. And one that we still, to this day, having played it so many times later, enjoy. And this is going to go to Ticket to Ride. Man, this game still is one that I pull out with people that are maybe haven't played modern board games before, because it just it just works so well. One thing I found is specifically, I have the just classic USA map. There's lots of different maps. That's one of the cool things. You can kind of explore that if you're into it. But just having that, the map of the, kind of the US out in front is an inviting thing. Like it's a familiar thing. People, you think about some games people look at and they're like, what in the heck am I looking at? Whereas it's like, okay, I've already got a point of familiarity. So it kind of welcomes people into that. And even the destination tickets, like it's 2 cities. I know where those 2 cities are, even if some of them are slightly inaccurate on the map.
Yeah.
But so it's got some points of common ground, but then what you're actually doing, I find, is simple and yet just such a fun, interesting exercise of, you either on your turn take cards to build up, colored cards in your hand, or you play cards to place trains out on the map because you're ultimately trying to complete these destinations. But the shared map, it's always so interesting of, do I keep just taking cards as efficiently as possible to, try to, because ultimately, you're trying to be as efficient with your turns, but you also have the tension of you can get blocked. And, like if someone takes, you're kind of looking and you're like, what are my critical routes connections I need? And do I need to maybe do a less efficient move, maybe even get some wilds and get that route because it's so important to me. So Ticket to Ride, I think, works so well for a family because it really just, I think, gives an intro to what modern board gaming has of getting cards, playing on a shared board, just great mechanics. And one that, I mean, gosh, Ryan, how many times have we played Ticket to Ride? And we still really enjoy it. And so one that you talk about, a family board game that you're not going to get tired of, you can keep playing, over and over, and then potentially get other maps and whatnot. I think it's one that I just have to recommend on a top family game list with how well it has worked for our family. So that is my number 4 absolute classic, Ticket to Ride.
Yeah, Ticket to Ride, I think, is the first game you think of with this topic, or at least a lot of people would think of.
For good reason.
And for good reason, exactly. Such good reason that it is also my number 4. Yeah, it's the first one that I knew was going to be on the list. It was just like, where exactly is it going to be? I still think it came out over 20, I think it's like at its 20-year anniversary or around there.
Wow.
It's still, in my opinion, in the top tier of options for family board games. I think it's a masterpiece of simplistic design that still, with those 3 actions, are all in this healthy tension together. You kind of talked about the tension between taking cards and playing, but then there's also this tension of, when do I take destinations? If I take them earlier, I can optimize better because I know where I'm going to need to go. But then I'm not doing those other 2 things. So I think it's brilliant. I think maybe the one thing that keeps it from maybe being the number 1 on my list is there is a little bit of the element of these destinations are all or nothing. And like when people miss their destinations, it can be a little bit of a downer to get this huge negative or not be anywhere close. And I know that sometimes can put people off. But yeah, it is just such a solid system. And it's one that if you really enjoy it, pick up some other maps, try some different things. But this is one that even so many years later, I love playing Ticket to Ride. I still do. And that's coming from, Dango and I definitely, if you ever see like our top games of all time, we skew to these heavier strategy games.
Yeah.
But Ticket to Ride is one that just, oh man, it's like comfort food, just that simple system, and it plays so fast. So have to recommend it.
Very nice.
As one of the top family games.
It's going to be interesting coming down to these top 3 here, Ryan.
I'm very curious, actually.
I think I've got one overlap with you. I doubt the other 2. Well, I know, not the other. So we'll see. My number 3 is a game that I just absolutely love. And in terms of a list like this, where you talk about being able to be accessible at like different player counts. Kind of, for I think this game really kind of the 4 to 7. I know you had Sushi Go Party as your card drafting game of choice. I raised the complexity a little bit, but just because I love this one so much, and this is going to go to Seven Wonders. This is another, classic in the modern board game, industry. And this to me is one of my favorite experiences of card drafting. Ryan talked about just the simple element of everyone has a hand of cards, you pick one and you pass. And the beauty of it is everyone's playing at the same time. So there's no downtime in this game. You are constantly in that decision space. And Seven Wonders kind of, compared to a Sushi Go Party, raises a little bit of what's going on a little bit more. The cards have a little bit more in terms of kind of a little more complexity in some of the scoring. There's some shared stuff like military where you're actually comparing with your neighbors, which I think that's a really fun spatial element of the game, especially, you're playing with like 6 or 7 players. This idea that you don't care as much about kind of what's happening at the people on the other end of the table, but these people next to you, you care a lot. And I don't know, that's a fun kind of everyone in the group experiencing that.
Yeah.
I find really interesting. And the cards are just so enjoyable. The different types of cards there are. There's the blues that go for victory points, the greens that I don't have time to explain how the greens score, but they score in kind of these weird ways and whatnot. Military is more of a like group thing of the people next to you. And then everyone has their own unique player board, a wonder of the world, that does kind of its own thing, and you can build your own wonder. This one we've also played quite a few times, and every single time I am so excited to play it again. And so for it to be a game that I can introduce to someone and then potentially love it and me still be this excited, I think it's one that why it's landing now in my top 3 of games that I think families would really, really enjoy playing together. So that is my number 3. Kind of surprised actually it's landed that high, but the more I thought about it, it's one of my favorites.
And really, really broad player count helps that too.
It does. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think our lists are actually going to complement each other really well, because I think yours went just a little bit heavier and I skewed a little bit lighter. Yep. So I think it actually gives some nice options here of like, you know your family. We don't know you.
I'm just a little smarter than Ryan, I guess.
Yeah. If you want a little bit more strategy in your game, some of these that Dingle suggested, like I would say the Wingspan, Seven Wonders, Heat, those are the ones I think, would worth considering.
Yeah.
But yes, I think we got some great options here. My number 3 is another one I didn't think was going to be on the list until I thought about it more, and it may surprise you actually. It caps at 4 players, and I'm thinking like 4 players. So this is a very specific recommendation. It's like you've got 4 people, in your family that are going to be able to play this game repeatedly. But if that's your situation, I have to recommend My City as
that's not what I was thinking you were going to say.
As a really, really strong option for a family game like that. So My City is in this category of games that has kind of been, I guess, invented in the last 10 years in hobby board games, which are these legacy games where you're actually making permanent changes to the game from game to game. And that could be like stickers on the board or writing things. Mm-hmm. And My City takes that and puts it into just a great family weight package where it's at its core a spatial puzzle where you've got these tiles, and every turn a card's going to be revealed, and everybody needs to add that tile to their board somewhere. Then another one's revealed and you have to add it, and you're trying to like kind of optimize how you're placing them. But you play through these chapters where in each chapter kind of the scoring of what you're trying to do is different, and then you're going to have the opportunity to make changes to your board. Like you might be adding stickers to your board or thing that make things work a little different, or whoever loses in the game is actually going to get a little bit more benefit to like help them in future games, which I think is another benefit in a family context. If you're not all quite on the same level, there's a little bit of helping whoever's maybe falling behind. But I could see a family of 4 just having an amazing experience with this game. Because something you get with these legacy games is this shared excitement of the discovery of the game. Because there's literally sealed envelopes that you don't know what's coming. And so finding out like, oh my gosh, the game's changing in this way. And now like, oh, we want to play it again. And the advantage of a game like My City is it's often easy to play it again because these games, we're talking 20 minutes for a game, sometimes even less. And so you can play multiple ones in one session. And so it's a more pointed recommendation. Like it's only if I'm saying basically if you have 4 people that are going to consistently play together. But I think it just for that scenario kind of knocks it out of the park and could be just such a fun shared experience that you look back on of how you went through this game together.
Very nice.
So yeah, that pushed My City pretty far up my list.
Yeah, it didn't make my list, but man, after you talking about it, Ryan, gosh,
I'm gonna go play right now.
That was solid. Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of a My City campaign, I guess you call it, right now. So I will tune in later for my thoughts on that. My number 2 is one you have already mentioned, much lower on your list. But honestly, it just, in terms of a family experience of like, you can play it technically with as young, very, very young to older, and the way it just gracefully allows everyone in between to experience that and have fun is why it's landing so high for me. Along with I've probably played it a couple times in the last month, so there's a little bias there. But my number 2 is going to go to Cascadia. I think this is such a fantastic family game. Like, it is so simple in terms of what you are doing. And like you said, like it's hard to cheat. Like the decision of you just pick the paired drafting, which is such a fun element of just looking at these 4 pairs and
I love that thing. Yeah, but do I really want that other thing?
And there are ways you can manipulate with these nature tokens or whatnot. But for the most part, you're picking from those 4.
They're pine cones.
They're pine, aren't they called?
No, it's funny because the rule book like calls them like nature tokens. They're pine cones, right? Doesn't everybody call those pine cones?
But anyway, so like that drafting, is really interesting and whatnot. But then, just the fact that, and actually this last month we played with someone who was younger and they had a great time, and yet also it has a ceiling of thinking that is quite large. Like, there is, if you want to really, because there are a ton of your, whatever you're drafting, you're trying to both maximize the land, matching the land to get your areas of, land as large as possible. You're trying to place animals based off their unique scoring. You're looking at other players' boards to see how are they doing on specific lands, because you get bonus points if you have the highest one. So all of that just creates it like, oh wow, I really can think heavily on this. And so the fact that let's say you have a family and one of the people in the family loves thinking really heavy, they can do that in this game. And you've got someone who just wants to have a casual good time, they can do that.
Collect salmon.
They can do that as well, and everyone can have a great time. So for me, that's why Cascadia shot all the way up, as I was just like, this works well for such a wide range of people, and is one that is, I think, fun for everyone. So that is why it is all the way up at my number 2.
I had a feeling you were going to have it higher. Really, the only knock on it's probably the player count capping at 4.
Yeah.
Though I guess we have talked about, we haven't tried the Landmarks expansion, but there is an expansion that increases the player count. So there's at least a possibility there. Great pick. My number 2 is one that I feel like Daniel and I have definitely championed on the channel. We're just big fans of this game, have seen it just work amazing over and over again as we've gotten this one to the table. This is the Quacks of Quedlinburg. And Quacks is this game of pushing your luck as you're building these potions by drawing ingredients out of a bag and deciding how long do you want to go before you stop. Because if you get too many of these white tokens, it explodes, and then you're not going to get as many rewards at the end of the round. So it's got that piece of it driving the game. But then you get to customize your bag by buying ingredients, and you can pick which ingredients you want to put in your bag. And every game, these ingredients have different abilities. So you might be in a game that like reds go further if they come after pumpkins have already been in your pot, or a green, if it's one of the last two in your pot, you're going to get an extra ruby or something, which is a resource that can be used. And so there's this extra layer of strategically coming up with how you want to customize your own odds, but then you get to apply those odds in like the most fun way. You talked about the dopamine hits with Space Base.
Yeah,
this has got that where every time you draw one out of the bag, it's like, oh no, that's what I wanted. And like a lot of the abilities you want to come out in like a certain sequence or after each other. There's everybody loves the yellow that like the next chip is going to be double
times 2,
and so it's like, oh man, please
draw
let me get my 4 and all of that's happening simultaneously. So again, it has that advantage we've talked about some of these games of everybody always feels engaged. You're not waiting on other players' turns, and it just comes together in such a fun experience, such a fun energy where everybody's kind of constantly getting those fun moments. But then, as we've talked about, which is really kind of a big driving thing on this list and some of the ones that have gone to the top, is that like people that want to think more have this whole puzzle of how do I customize my bag and when's the right time to push harder and not. And people who don't can just, buy whatever they feel like and just, go for it. And so I've seen it work really well across that. This is one that if you get the base game, it is going to cap at 4 players. The expansion, which we do highly recommend, it's a very good expansion. The Herb Witches expansion does bump it to 5. So you're looking at a 5-player game. I'd be remiss to not mention that I've had good success playing a 10-player game where everybody played in pairs, which there's some games where that would not work well. But in this game, because you're now as a team thinking like, do we do another one? Do we do another one? You're like sharing in this, pushing your luck. And then you can also talk about like what you think you should buy. And so I actually find that playing in pairs is a very fun experience, and being able to play with, 8 or 10 people it's a party game. I mean, that's like usually not the type of game you can pull out in that setting. So yeah, absolutely recommend Quacks. We've played it a lot. I think I'm over like 40 plays now. And I, as again, someone who enjoys maybe heavier games, still love getting this one to the table. Highly recommend taking a look at Quacks.
Yeah, very nice. Unfortunately, Quacks didn't make my list. Just kidding, Ryan.
Quacks I'm going to be outright shocked if this is not Daniel's.
Quacks. Yeah, Quacks is my number one. Ryan hit so much of what I was kind of thinking there. So why am I even talking? I don't know. But
on with it.
No, I think even maybe more so than what I said about Cascadia, because I agree that like everyone, both the person who loves like combos and strategy, they get that, and the person who just wants to buy things, they get that. But what's kind of nice is because of the luck element, you can win if like having the best, like in Cascadia, like I feel like the better player is gonna win.
It's maybe often. A little more correlated to skill.
Whereas this one a little bit does create. Now, it's not all luck. Like definitely the better players will win more often, and we've seen that. That's why I usually beat Ryan. But
I don't know. I'm pulling up the stats here.
Okay,
they don't look good.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But there is the possibility where even if maybe you're not playing as well, because of the luck and the way things can come out, you can pull off a win. And I think that almost makes it more accessible of, people can get a win, even if maybe they're not the most strategic player.
No, it's actually a good point. It's something we probably could have included more explicitly in our criteria of like, you do want a family game to have this nice balance of luck and skill to where even if you have a group that's kind of at different skill levels, anybody could win. Because it's not a very fun family game if the one person is just never winning.
Yeah. But it strikes that nice balance where I think also the strategic player doesn't feel like it's out of their control.
Yeah, they control their
they feel
odds.
like I have a lot of I have a lot of control in how I kind of create my distribution in my bag. But then you do recognize like there's a lot of luck with it as well. And so, but it hits that nice sweet spot where obviously I would say we tend to lean more towards the strategy side, and we really enjoy it and don't feel like, oh, well, it's just a crapshoot. Who cares? And so I think it really hits that sweet spot well. And so for a family game, gosh, you have to get this. Like, it's so good. It's so good, man.
Well, and if you're going to play repeatedly with the same group, you've got the ability to change up the ingredient abilities.
The variability is great.
It's excellent.
Wonderful. Well, Ryan, I have no idea what your number one is, but
it's it was not on your list, but there's a good reason why.
Okay, I know what it is actually.
Gosh, this bug is flying in my face.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Please comment below how many times the fly in my room has come into frame.
Thought you killed it, Ryan. You sick freak. Okay.
So my number one is in the same family of a game that you had on your list. It's really just the difference of you leaning a little bit heavier and me leaning a little bit lighter.
Okay.
This is Seven Wonders Architects.
Wow, that's your number
which is basically
one.
The more family friendly or just it's a little bit lighter version of Seven Wonders, a little more accessible. And yeah, I kind of struggled, but for me, I think it hit on some key things that were criteria that were pushing games up my list. One is the broad player count. So going up to 7 players and playing well across all of those is a really
How
big
low would you play
benefit.
Player count?
3 is probably the least I play with, and it would work.
Nice.
I mean, it would probably work fine with 2, but you're just in a different category once you have 2 players. So it goes up to 7 players. It's so simple, like to teach this and get it going with a group. It's always just instead of like Seven Wonders where everybody's simultaneously card drafting, here you actually take turns, but you're either taking the top card of the deck to your left that's between you and that player, the one to your right that's between you and that player, or drawing blind off the common deck. So it's always like you can see 2 cards. Is there's one of those you want, or do you want to just try taking one off the top? And very similar to Seven Wonders, there's the different color types, and like you might be getting military, you might be getting resources to help you build your wonder, and these different things. And so play just flies around the table. It's the type of game where you can be chatting and stuff. Like it's pretty low overhead to be playing this game. But it still has that key thing that we're looking for of if you want to think a little more, you can, and you can kind of be watching the pacing and like, what am I kind of wanting to go after? And there's just some fun little things like with the technologies. If you get green cards, like make a set of green cards, can get these progress tokens that give you like an ability or an extra scoring. And so it's like just enough that like, for someone like me that typically wants something a little bit more strategic for a game that plays in 15 to 20 minutes, really. It's like, wow, that was a nice little, it had some nice things to chew on in that 15 to 20 minutes. And so, yeah, I think I on my list prioritize the like accessibility and maybe the player count a little more, which gave this a little bit more weight on my list. But I do think like, especially if you're playing a broader age gap, like maybe you've got younger kids, but you also want to be playing with older kids and adults, and you have the potential that you're going to have bigger groups. You might, you have a family game that you really like, but then you have somebody over and you want to be able to, show them this game and like have the player count be able to handle that.
Right.
I think Seven Wonders Architects is just really perfect for what it's trying to do. There's going to be people that play it and are like, this is too light.
Well, then just go to my list.
Those are the people that should be playing.
If that's you,
Seven
then
Wonders.
look at my list.
But I think you have to know it for what it is. Like when I play it, I don't go, oh, this is too light. I go, wow, this is awesome. They were able to put this into this 15 to 20 minute game that I can teach in 5 minutes,
right?
And play with just about anybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, Seven Wonders Architects, a newer game. I mean, I played it a lot less than a lot of things on here, but I do think it is one of the strongest kind of just all around family games that you can get right now.
Well, there you have it, Ryan. That is our top 10 recommendations for family board games. What a wonderful list. Check them out.
Hey, thanks for watching. We really hope maybe you found some options here that you might want to introduce with your family, or it could be new games to be your new favorite. You can check those out below. We talk a lot about board games on this channel, and we've got a couple other videos here you can check out if you want to browse some of our content, and we will see you in the next one.